Hi, folks. Welcome to the very first episode of Indimotard's Motorcycle Diaries. We're setting this out as an introduction to try and figure out to capture what we've done so far. So, this is our very first episode, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hi everyone, this is Gopal here. I've been working with Indimotard for the past two and a half years now. And I've always wanted to question Anand with respect to how he started Indimotard and why he started Indimotard. So through this podcast, we want to achieve all this. And now, since Anand sir is here with me, I'll ask him the question, why are we doing the podcast?
So, thank you, Gopal. That's a pretty interesting question for me because somewhere in my mind, I've always thought that what we've set out to do, what we want, what we are doing, hasn't really been captured because of the magnitude of, I feel, not because I want to brag, but the magnitude of all that we have done is still very small compared to what is out there in the world today. But at the same time, I feel that there is so many things here that I wanted to capture for eternity in one sense, to say, why did we start this? What was the reason? What was the driving factor to say, oh, I should quit my job and I should rope in Prashant Kumar and I should try and do something that is driven by passion and motorcycles. And so my answer to that is very simple, is that I think I'd like to capture all that we have done. We've done a lot of things, from building motorcycles to racing motorcycles to touring on motorcycles to just being absolutely mad on motorcycles. And it would be really nice if I was to sort of look at this and say 20 years from now, to look back at this and say, oh shit, I did all this. That's kind of where I'm coming from. And I had a great team. We were supported by a lot of good people. Good karma has brought us here. And those are good memories that I would like to capture forever.
Then sir, then we should start with how did Indimotard start? Can you please tell us a little bit?
Yeah. So it's a good question, because I don't think I'm a person who looked at it as, oh, I want to quit a job and do something, and I want to be an entrepreneur. None of that. Actually, honestly speaking, it really started out of a whim, and I want to blame, or I want to sort of also give credit to Prashant Kumar for having triggered this thought in my head. I'd moved back to India. I had raced motorcycles abroad for a while, and I'd moved back to India. So I was sort of hanging around. I'd gone to some drag event in Jakur, and it turned out to be meeting a lot of people, motorcycles.
I think that was the Room 2006.
Yeah, I think it was the BP one, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I entered the GS as an entry in the foreign category. Not that I did much, but it was kind of fun.
Bike on a drag strip.
So it was kind of fun. I ended up meeting quite a few people there, and along the way, I sort of also, I think I bought a RD 350 just because I sort of went back to my years in college in India, and I was like, okay, I want an RD 350.
We'll come back to that RD story later.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to, I brought it up because I think one of the proponents of us doing some of these things was, obviously RD Dreams, but I'll get to that in a bit. And part of what Prashant Kumar did to me was really sort of, I want to say, opened my mind, my brain, my soul to saying there's a lot more to India than what I knew, what I saw, what I'd heard. And suddenly I was on a trip with him in 2005, I think, 4 or 5, into the Himalayas, and he arranged everything in one sense of renting a motorcycle from Karol Bagh, and we were hitting the road, and we were out there, I think, for easily about 3 or 4 weeks. And he just sort of, by the time I got to know him, he was somebody who had, I want to say, evolved with respect to motorcycles.
So you should tell us that story where he found that part in that the Triumph part in one shop.
Yeah.
You should tell us that story.
Yeah, so we were in Delhi, and we were roaming around somewhere, and he said, we're going to go here, we're there, we're here. And all of this is through the gullies of Delhi, and sort of wandering. And this was my first time in Delhi. And we walk into some little gully, and then there's one guy sitting in one little thing in a corner. And obviously it's a shop. I can see sort of there's little motorcycles parked outside. So he goes, Anna, just wait outside, just 2 minutes or whatever. So then meanwhile, we're having a cup of chai. The guy greets him. And then we're sitting outside, and then some guy on a cycle comes by. So Prashant said, Anna, you want to get your ears cleaned? I said, huh? So he says, just sit, pull up a chair. The guy on the cycle stops. There I am sitting in the middle of like some gully. The guy stopped his bicycle, and before I know it, my head is tilted. He's got something in my ear, and my ears are cleaned.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell is going on, right? I'm like in this surreal world. So then I walk into the shop, I finish this ear cleaning, and I'm suddenly thinking, oh my God, what is, where am I? And then we walk into the shop, and there's this guy, and they were, talking with Prashi. And then they open the door, and then there's motorcycles, Triumphs, BSAs, Velocets, and then there's an attic. There's more parts, and then there's more parts. And then we end up, Prashant goes in, he finds what he wants, he comes out, and he goes, oh. And then they both have an argument about which Triumph part this is.
Yeah, some piston or something.
Pistons, he bought some pistons, he bought some foot pegs. And they're both very clear. No, it's 1962, it's 1967. And they're having this vague argument about this whole thing. And I'm like completely clueless about these old motorcycles.
Yeah.
So that was my sort of one part of an experience of like traveling and seeing India through the bylanes and literally the gullies of India, where I said there's so much going on and there's so much of history. There's people with knowledge who don't come out, and they're not on the internet, and they're not sort of out there promoting themselves, but it exists. And the stories behind all of this, there's a lot more that I think over the years of traveling with him that I've sort of think. Anyway, so digressing, but why Indimotard? So we traveled like this for the next 2 or 3 years, 2 years I think, and I was still working in the IT job. And then I just suddenly thought myself, what am I doing in life, And this 2 years of travel awakened something in me where we were staying in, I think we were spending maybe about, I'm going to say apart from petrol, maybe 300 rupees a day. We were staying in some monastery, we were staying in some little, like somebody's house with a little bed in the corner, in Nako, in Tabo, in Rekongpio, in all of these places.
But all of this is back in 2006.
Yeah, 2005, 6, right? That time. And I was sort of...
And I'm sure not many of them have even heard of these names then.
Yeah, and it was all like... Prashant seemed to know it like without a GPS.
Yeah.
So, he was like, we're going there, we're going here, last petrol stop, we better fuel up, we have to get a inner line permit. I was like, where the fuck is this guy from? Right?
Yeah.
It just blew my mind. I mean, and then we ended up in all these places. So when I came back, I think somewhere in my mind, I said, I think I want to quit. So fortunately for me, the company offered some sort of voluntary retirement, something where, they give me a small package. And I said, great. I was working at Intel at that time. So I think I met Prashi, I think the next couple of weeks. And we met in Java City that was the hangout of RTMC at that time. So they used to all meet on Wednesday evenings and all that. So Vijay Raghavan, Sandeep, all of these guys would be there. So I pulled Prashi aside. I said, Prashi, I want to start something, I think we can offer some tours. Because I had gone to the mountains and suddenly I was obviously enamored by it, and obviously it's as even more beautiful than you can describe. And the confidence that he sort of inspired the very next moment was simply saying, let's do it. There wasn't an hesitation. There wasn't like, okay, who's funding it? Where are we doing this? What are we doing? The confidence that was, that one line that I think has continued throughout all of our lives with him was, let's do this. There was never hesitation or, I don't think you can do it. Whatever it was, he would find a solution. He would find a way to work around it. That's kind of how we got started. We went and bought, I think, 10 classic 500s, the teal colored ones. And I think Technique Motors was probably like wondering, what's wrong with these guys.
Yeah.
But we bought those motorcycles and we started offering tours. But I also just wanted to add in that mix is, while we were doing this, in the drag race, I had met a couple of guys who were, at that time, I want to say they're still around in terms of, like, they call themselves the Red Liners now. And I really wanted to sort of thank them because they were instrumental in getting our first tour going as customers. So very interesting that they pretty much they knew me from as much as a handshake. And before you knew it, I had 10, 12 people signed up. Motorcycles, the trucks were arranged. The vehicles were transported to Shimla. Brand new Husqvarna's SM610s along with couple of Enfields, a KTM 990 Adventure, and we had like a 15-day agenda of traveling in the mountains with these guys. So, they were really, I want to say, uh, I would thank them by saying that that's kind of what got us started. It wasn't the website, or it wasn't some promo, it wasn't some announcement. Literally, just people, good karma, good people who just said, I think I can trust these guys to take us to the mountains. And literally got us started on our first tour. Um, Everything that we learned from there, I mean, obviously has been a learning, but um, we had the backup vehicle, it was an all-inclusive package, right? It had everything in it. So the tour was a success. We got to places on a motorcycle that we would have never otherwise gotten to. Um, and Prashi was there, myself, Joshua, the other 10 customers. We had a great time. Like literally, sort of today, I think it's changed a lot in terms of where we are in terms of the road conditions in Lahore, Spiti, Kinnaur, all of these places.
And navigation's available.
Yeah, GPS is available, etc. No network
Maps.
coverage. And I was like, my God, we've gotten started.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we got started with Indimotard.
So, sir, you can start by telling us what started you or what prompted you to get into motorcycling, and how did it transition to riding on the racetrack, and you raced a few classes, the FZR 400 in America, and how did it lead to the track school in India, which is our TW track school?
Yeah, so it's definitely a point of reflection for me when I look back and think about what was this calling with motorcycles. And I think my earliest memory was two parts. One was stealing my dad's motorcycles to, push it down the hill, and so that he wouldn't hear it start. And this was in our home in Wayanad, which is obviously on top of a hill. And, we would push it down. And somehow I kind of figured out by listening, by hearing, by seeing how this clutch and the gear thing worked. So it was not like somebody actually taught me. It was a Rajdoot 175 that I would push down the hill. I knew how to, brake. And I would go down to the hill, start the bike, kickstart it. And then I would sort of put it into gear and try some, releasing the clutch, stall it a few times. And before I knew it, this was like an addiction.
But we got to see one photo of you wheeling one RX on one wheel. So you got proficient at it, is what I'm saying. So we'll share a link to that photo in one of our descriptions. But sir, please continue.
Yeah, so that's a kind of whatever the bug of motorcycling. And the second part of what I mentioned was, I think I had some conversation with my uncles, cousins, and they were interested in cars, and I sort of was in motorcycles. And I think my cousin said, how can you like this motorcycle thing? It's so unsafe. And I said, no, it's the most liberating thing ever in my life. I just hate sitting in a car. And I think when I joined engineering, I bugged the shit out of my dad, and I finally got a Honda CD 100 at that time, which was claimed to give a mileage of 100 kilometers to a liter. So I always been fascinated with this RD 350 at that time. And I think on my first vacation back on the CD 100, I was studying in Coimbatore. I came back and I was at this local shop which is famous for doing mods and all that. So there was a guy sitting there and he said, oh, new CD 100. I said, yeah, it's 100 miles, 100 kilometers to a liter, but not that I was impressed by the motorcycle anyway. So there was an RD being worked on. I said, oh, is this your RD? And he said, yeah, it's my RD. I said, oh, I love RDs. I said, out of the, whatever, like a whimsical thing, I said, do you want to exchange? And he looked at me like something's wrong with me, and he nodded, and I threw him my keys, and I took his keys. And then I was a proud owner of an RD 350. The funny part was, I think I started riding that RD 350, and I think I went to my dad's office one day. I parked the bike, and he came out, and he said, oh, what is this bike? I said, oh, the Honda, whatever, it's not the Honda, I exchanged it. He said, why? I said, no, it's a nice bike. What's the mileage? I said, get some 15 or 18 or something. So he already started like sort of smirking. Then he said, okay, where are the papers? I looked at him and said, what? What papers? At that point he gave me one tight slap. So he said, you bought a bike, you exchanged it, fine, fair enough. Not that I agree with it. But at least have the basic decency to get the papers of this motorcycle so that it's in your name. Anyway, so the RD was my, like, I lived on it. I literally lived, breathed on that motorcycle going to Coimbatore and back. I was in Wayanad, my college was in Coimbatore. So I would take the Kalati Ghats, I would take, anything to make it more dangerous, more fun. And the RD would shit mileage, which means that anytime my sisters asked me for a ride to into town, my bribe was 1 liter of petrol. Right. So this was like a constant, like a joke amongst us to say, oh, if Anand has to take you means you have to put 1 liter of petrol. So the RD got started like that. And the RX, of course, we used to go hang out in these local like places that we used to sort of just be chilling out with friends. And then this whole wheelie thing started, and some pictures of people started taking photographs of us doing wheelies up and down this thing. And word reached my dad that, I was being a pretty much a nuisance somewhere on this in between all of the back roads. He never took me to task for it, but that bug was there. In my mind, I was like, oh, you know what, motorcycles are the thing, and I cannot give this up. Or rather, it really gave me that peace of mind. I moved to the US for my masters, and obviously, I miss motorcycles. I think somewhere in my head, I was like, okay, this is. I have to put this on hold. I never thought I'd give it up, or never ever thought that I won't be riding again. Once I got my job, I got my first salary. I think it was some $1,000 odd. I quickly looked up the classifieds, and there was a guy selling a whole lot of bikes, and says Honda Nighthawk 750. So I was like, how much was it? He said $600, and my salary was 1,200. My rent was, I think, $250 odd. I called him. I said, I'm coming. I gave him the $600, and I had a motorcycle. And I went and got myself a helmet, and I started like using that to commute, because most people who go to the US, obviously, at least in my head, were like wanting the biggest achievement was the first thing was to buy a car.
Yeah.
So I bought a motorcycle, and I showed up at work on a motorcycle. I would do my groceries. I would use the mirror just like you would in India. I would hang my bags of groceries from the mirror. And I was like, man, this is it. So that kind of, prompted me to do this, right? Then somewhere, obviously you're in the US, you start reading motorcycle magazines, this, that. And then 93, I think it was, 93, Bike of the Year, Ninja 7, ZX7R. I was like, man, I want to buy this bike. But my credit was shit, because I had run away from some credit card bills and all that. So they would call me, and I would pretend not to be myself. So it was on, and they was like, oh, I think he's left, he's gone to India or something, some nonsense. And then I would sort of escape all the shit. So we went and walked into the dealership, and I think it was a lunchtime. So with my friend and his sister. And so I said, how much is this? We were drooling over it. So the guy says, $7,999, $7,999. I said, is it available? He said, yeah, we have stock. He says, ready? You can have a bike. I said, yeah, sure. So I turned to my friend and I said, dude, you have a credit card? He said, yeah. I said, swipe it. So, of course, he had good credit. I had shit credit. I didn't have a credit card. And in 1 hour, I had a motorcycle. So now I thought I'm the cat's whiskers. I'm like, shit, I've got a motorcycle for $8,000, and it's like the ultimate motorcycle, the bike of the year. So we would ride, into the canyons and what was called at that time, I mean, even today, it's Alice's Restaurant. Saturday, Sundays were just like filled with motorcycles. There was a cafe, there was all kinds of bikes. I mean, Harleys to classics to super bikes to all this. And we would just hook up with random people and go canyon carving. So just like pasted. Not that I knew much about riding at that time. If I look back on it now, I'm like, wow, I escaped a lot of nonsense from riding pretty as a hooligan, I would say.
A lot of cops also.
Yeah, so my friend Mike was a very close friend of mine. He introduced me to the whole thing of riding in the canyons. And I think we were standing around one day, and then some boys came and said, we want to ride. And so we started riding. And I think we stopped. And then this one guy said, have you guys been to the racetrack? I was like, what is that? So before we knew it, we had signed up for a class at Willow Springs Motorcycle Club. And we had a one-day class, and I was hooked. So my racing career started, if I call it career, meaning learning started from there. I had the ZX7. I felt it was way too much. I thought I was I had a motorcycle and everything was it. I forgot that, the brains and the skill is what you need. And every fucking race I was finishing, as my friend would call it, DFL. So, and DFL meant dead fucking last, right? So I was like, what's wrong with, obviously I thought I knew how to ride, and it was the best, most gratifying experience of learning, unlearning, and humbled almost, I want to say, by this experience of being at Willow Springs. I raced 1 year with the ZX7, didn't finish anywhere. And then my friend suggested, Mike said, you know what, I think we should just get ourselves Yamaha FZR 400s. And Yamaha FZR 400s were the next best thing from the RD 350. So it was almost like a natural sort of thing to pick that motorcycle.
Transition.
And I had a very interesting story of how I bought that FZR 400.
Mm-hmm.
Some forums existed. I found a motorcycle and I end up going to San Francisco with my pickup truck. And I park, there's an address, and there's this sort of a eerie looking house with these gargoyles standing in the front lawn with the lights coming out of the eyes. And I said, okay, I don't even know where I am. And I had gone alone. It was like, I think, evening 7, it was dark. Anyway, I parked the truck, I walk over, and I walk to the main door, and there's more of these gargoyles and a very gothic sort of theme. And there's this light shining up from the top right on my head, and it's looking pretty eerie. So I knock on the door, and the guy opens the door, and there's another light shining on his head, and what I see is this guy standing with multicolored hair, orange, pink, indigo, and he goes, "Hi, I'm Wade," and I go, "Hi, I'm here for the bike." So it turns out to be this guy, his name is Wade Boyd. He would race at the Isle of Man. So I bought the bike from this guy. And I walk into his living room, and I'm not shitting you. Wall to the ceiling is motorcycle pictures, photos, posters, pasted. Everywhere. There's no wallpaper. There is just motorcycle photos.
Wow.
Of him. And then I realized this guy was racing in Isle of Man, and they actually in San Francisco had a little thing called Let's Send Boyd to the Isle of Man Fund.
Oh.
So people in the neighborhood would get money and send this fellow across the oceans with the motorcycle, and I bought that motorcycle from him, and I didn't know the history till I saw him, or Josh actually took a picture of him in 2000, I think 15 or 16 at the Isle of Man with the same funky hair. And he was there.
So essentially, he crowdfunded his way to the Isle of Man back then.
Yeah. And it was mad. So that was my first motorcycle which I felt was competitive, which I learnt a lot. And it turned out to be such a blessing because FZR 400, Mike and myself raced in that category for the 400 class for the next, I don't know how many years. Just every month, January through December, was Friday practice, Saturday practice, Sunday races. So we would put 2 motorcycles on a pickup truck from San Francisco, load it up with all the tools, head down after work, after 3-4 in the evening, Friday, for a 5-hour journey. We would camp out. We didn't have much money at that time, because tires were about the same as today, meaning they're expensive. So we would camp out at the track with a tent, with a basic sort of mattress, if you call it. Use the toilets. The showers were open, and it would save us a lot of money as opposed to staying in hotels. And then we would race. And the grid, or rather the pit lane, easily about 100-200 people. And I can't tell you the feeling of camaraderie of that kind of people, because I would crash and there would be somebody standing there next to me with a set of levers, shift lever, a brake lever, saying, "You got the race coming up, use it. We'll figure out the monies later." So that sort of the camaraderie was something that I was like, really something that was awakening for me, to say that there are people here there was Chris Ulrich, and there was Chuck Graves, and there's John Hopkins. They're all here in the same pits, in the same class. And here I am standing with them, who have like probably had years of racing and history, and it was something that was emotionally sort of overwhelming on one hand, but at the same time the learning was just extraordinary. So that was sort of a very nice, I want to say, get away from street racing to get into track and learn how to ride better. So I want to say that's kind of where it got started, Gopal. So yeah. So we'd like to close our very first episode with that, Indimotard's Motorcycle Diaries. Do stay tuned for more. We have a whole menu of things that we'd like to sort of share with you, cover. Obviously, opinions are welcome. Do let us know how you might think that this could be better in terms of quality, content, some things that you might want to hear about us, and just general conversations that you might like to hear. Um, we've got a lot of thoughts in terms of both from a rallying experiences that we've had with the raid, with Baja, the track experiences, tours in different parts of the world, all of those that we would like to capture and share with you. We'd also, obviously, we're trying to have some guests that we would like to have as part of the podcast, people who have traveled with us, people who have done some crazy, mad things on motorcycles that I think are definitely worth listening to. So do stay tuned for more as we wrap up episode 1 for you. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.
Indimotard.